What was this?
This is 6. You'll be looking after the house. 6 is a last name.
Yeah.
How's everybody's week going?
Busy.
Reminds me of getting back just after New Year's, and Tuesday felt like the Mondayest Tuesday ever. I guess we don't have any names on the agenda items. So does somebody want to take the 1.1 release discussion?
I guess I've been all over the place, but are we feeling good about, like, after last week's discussion about what to change before we do another RC? I have a feeling we're not going to do this by that conference at the end of the month, but I'd be delightfully proven wrong.
Yeah, my suspicion, just knowing that I need to prepare for the conference myself, is that we probably won't have time to finish up all the RC items, that all the various open tasks on that milestone. So potentially kind of another RC, but yeah, I think the big thing from last week was just that we got some agreement from different parties that a registry can refuse a manifest if it has too many annotations. Which given that frees up the concern about lifting up the annotations up into the descriptor.
Okay, I know there was an outstanding item about conformance. Two ideas for this. So one, it's kind of hard before registries are implementing this to really write conformance. I think Azure has some level of support. I think Zata has some level of support, but I don't know. It'd be kind of hard. We basically have to code against one registry. I'm wondering if we want to punt conformance, or option 1 or 2, just check for the refers endpoint and see if it's there. Or plus, like, chucking a artifact manifest and see if it's there.
My own comfort level is to have conformance check for everything and anything we think we want to include in here. And then if we realize that we've got a problem, we want to relax the conformance later on, that's a lot easier.
I guess I'm just, I had hoped I'd have worked on this, but I just haven't, and I don't want to, like, hold up the release. So
I have in certain places volunteered to help you out on this one. So don't feel like you're the only person that has to work on the conformance on this.
well, if it doesn't matter if it's me or you or someone else. It's just, it hasn't been done yet, and we've been talking about it. So that's all I'm saying.
Jesse.
Hey, so this might be a good time. Sorry, I'm joining a little late. I was in a customer call. This is probably a good time to just float the general idea of, like, how the team feels, or how the community at large feels about a spec going out ahead of compliance tooling. As obviously historically we released the spec ahead of compliance for 1.0, And this is the first time we've had a minor release version. So we're kind of setting a precedent in some ways. So I wonder if we can kind of up level this and just say, is this a blocker or not? And then from there, we can determine if we need more resources or if we need to prioritize it. Because obviously we can say, yeah, everybody does it. It hasn't gotten done, like Josh said. And I think sometimes, I think somewhat, we're not sure if it's a priority or not.
I would be comfortable if we just had a single conformance test that failed. And so that way nobody can go and say that they're doing 1.1 conformance yet because we haven't created the test for it yet.
What
Is
if it
that-
was a, sorry if this came up earlier, I'm also late, but I don't have as good an excuse as Jesse did. What if we had a single conformance test that just said that slash references responds with an index successfully nothing about the contents of that index, just that it, you know, the bare minimum to say that you are 1.1. Are we worried about that letting people say they're 1.1 prematurely?
I am. I'm worried
Okay.
that somebody will implement it incorrectly, but
Yeah,
still get the check and pass and register themselves on the site and say that we've done everything OCI said that we were supposed to do.
Gotcha.
I think I'd agree with that. Yeah.
We also, as humans, approve those PRs to add them to the site, right? So we can say, like, listen, in this current state, the bar is on the floor. You've passed the bar, but that doesn't mean anything. So we're not going to merge this PR, right? We could. It's not an automated thing. It's like someone somewhere says it's you're above the bar.
I think it's a lot easier if we say it's an automatic fail with a message that says conformance has not been written for this yet for 1.1. And so if you want to do conformance, you can do 1.0, but not 1.1.
I suppose I'm fine with that. How do other people feel?
Or skip. I mean, do we have, I can't remember in compliance, do we have a skip? Might be a good, like, I know we talked about it very early. Full disclosure, I've been away from compliance for like 4 years, so.
We have ability to skip.
Yeah.
We're already doing that for, like, you can skip push or you can skip tag list, and so we could by default have a test that just
Yeah,
exits down 0, and then if you put a skip, you can do the skip, I guess. I'd be happy
I'd
with
be
that.
okay.
And then
I'd be
we could
okay
do
with
a
that.
1.1, 1.1.1 that has the real conformance, and then people can submit.
When people are running the conformance test, are they running it from the tagged release or are they running it from the main branch?
So for the compliance or like OCI conformance repo, it's the tag release. Like, it has to be, that's the rules. But I know, for example, ZOP is running off main. So if we throw something on there, their CI will fail today. They may have pinned it, actually. I really don't know. I don't know if someone's here.
So if we're looking at a hard deadline at the end of the month and we want to ignore the conformance challenge there, we've at least gotten out on that one. I'm not thrilled about that. Personally, I prefer to push it off until we have the conformance, and that way we do it all. But I'm not going to be the blocker on there if the rest of the community wants to get this released.
Well, I think people want it released. I mean, we started about a year ago talking about this, and we had a year to do the conformance. I think it could be the type of thing where, like, no one can say officially, quote, you're not seeing my fingers doing the quote signs, but officially 1.1 support. Obviously, but like, I think, like, there's a lot of people who want to start, talking about this in marketing and writing clients against it. And it may actually be in a better state, like once clients start doing stuff to really understand the behavior. But I like kind of agree with you, Brandon. I just am feeling busy and
Yeah, I'm
not wanting to push it out any further, kind of.
busy right now just because of the security con coming up at the end of the month. And so after that, I'll have time to actually sit down and go over this. Possibly before I get my presentation knocked out early.
If you want, I can put some time into helping out with the conformance test. I think I'm a little more comfortable with Go this year than I was last year.
I would offer also, like, yeah, I don't want to just like talk about this till the end of time. Nisha and Brandon and whoever else, do you want to like do a calendar on Monday or Tuesday next week if you have time, and just like do it together?
So next Monday is MLK Day.
Right. Yep.
But I can carve out some time on Tuesday. I'm on Pacific time, so I think it's compatible with Brandon's time. I don't know about you, Josh.
I'm fairly free after like your 10 a.m. So it's just a matter of Brandon being there. Like Brandon is kind of the refers expert here. So I like, it'd be nice to do a screen share. I can drive and kind of get the endpoints together. But I guess let's consider we could put something together, even if it's tiny, next week for conformance. What else besides that?
I think the other big one is probably what Sajay wanted to talk about, which is 365, which kind of gets into, are we going to include that in the 1.1 or not? And I don't know if Sajay or Jesse both want to take that one.
Yeah, Sajay, I put it on there, but it's Sajay's issue, so I could start. I think this just loops back to precedent setting, right? Like this is the first minor release of the spec, so we haven't had to worry about this. I can say specifically watching one client effort in particular kind of thrash around how to manage things across multiple registries. I think it's easy to say, well, we could we could just try and push an artifact, and if it fails, don't use them. But it's a lot simpler for clients to reason about saying, oh, it's 1.1, we can use artifacts. So it seems simple enough. It seems like it would not be, and I know Brandon, you had some concerns about it, which absolutely we should talk through. But I personally, I think that, and capabilities aside, like I know that was the original thing I brought up. We'll just put a pin in that, but just a simple version endpoint might make sense.
So I think we had landed, if we're going to do it, it needs to be capabilities, not just a single version, because a registry can mean a lot of different things behind a version number. And the question you usually have is this endpoint there? Is it going to support this manifest?
Yeah, I do agree with that, but I also feel like we're hand wavy enough. Like, I mean, as you all know, ECR is not 1.0 compliant, but it certainly is a 1.0 registry, right? And there are certain things that we could change. There's certain things we can't change. There's certain things we could change in the spec. But the reality is that at least a client can say, okay, that's a 1.0 spec. Oh, this behaves differently, weird, and like put in this little corner case and complain to us. And so I think that's the thing that's missing, is just a broad stroke that says roughly you can expect artifacts in the refers API if it's 1.1. If you behave weirdly, and whether that's registry X, registry Y, or registry Z, then the client implementer can say, hey, you behave weirdly. I had to put some workaround code in, and I don't like that. Here, fix that, right? Whereas right now, it's like every registry behaves a little differently. And so it makes it much more difficult.
Yes, definitely from the client side, I feel that as well. If a registry says that they're 1.0 because for some reason they don't want to support the artifact manifest, they only want to support images on their registry. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's not going to support the refer API. And so you would still need to go through and
Sure. Well, they can
use the
put that
server
in their
for the
docs.
refers.
Right. We talked
so
about that before. Like, I mean, I didn't mean to talk over you. I'm sorry. I'm really bad at that when I've had too much caffeine. Please continue.
Yeah, so my fear is that all the fallback scenarios that we had done for the refer API were designed there specifically so that all the clients would follow the same path, no matter what they're talking to. And so I don't want to get into a scenario where one client looks at the registry and says, hey, I checked the version API and saw this 1.0, so I'm going to go down one path. And another client looks at the registry and says, hey, I tried the refer API and it was available, so I'm going to use it. And now they're going down different paths. Go ahead, Jesse.
Sorry, I'm bad. Totally hear you. I agree that that is one potential outcome. I think that still lands in a position where a client implementer gets to say, hey, you're behaving weirdly. And then a client might say, I'm just always going to do 1.0 and I don't care what's there. And if the refers API is there, then I will use it and I'll surprise my users. Then people can say, hey, client, you're behaving weird, right? Like, so I think that there's always going to be those sorts of potentials. In broad strokes again, for a client to say, are you 1.1? Okay, cool. I know I now can use artifacts and refers API. That's kind of what we're looking for. There's always going to be this thing where like, well, it doesn't even implement it, right? Like, because a 1.0 registry that isn't touched might not even implement that version endpoint, right? That's not going to be not spec compliant for 1.0. So if it's not there, it doesn't mean that it wouldn't support the refers API. It just means that a client would have to discover that by other means and use it with caution, I think, because it could disappear, right? So I think that's kind of the way I'm thinking about this is we're just looking to establish a broad stroke sane protocol for just, trying to hand wave at some very high level. I got refers, I got artifacts, you can try and use them. I think that's kind of the intent. And if that's not explicit enough, I completely understand that we could work on it. But I think that there are other parts of the spec that are kind of like that, where this wouldn't be like a big sore thumb.
I think I'd want to see what behavior you want to change in what scenarios so that all clients are doing the same thing. And so I'd look for this to be a little bit more spelled out than hand wavy and say we're looking for broad strokes.
Well, no, not client. No, I don't mean hand wavy in the clients. I mean, so hand wavy is maybe the wrong thing. I meant signal flares or something, some way to say, hey, I've got these things and not really much detail, right? That's kind of what I mean. Put short, if a client can say, what's the version endpoint? Is it there? It's there. It says 1.1. Cool. I'm going to use artifacts and refers API. Like that is sort of the 80% of the solution for most use cases. Could you write a client that says, is there an endpoint? Is a version endpoint? No, there isn't. Is the refers API there? It is. Okay, I'll use it, right? You could do that. But it's sort of the happy path that we don't even have an answer for. So every client is forced to do something, and there's no way that they're all going to be uniformly implemented, right? Try this, try that. If this error code comes back, try this thing, give up entirely. That's kind of the world that we have now.
So let me be more specific in my question then. Let me throw a scenario out at you. You're looking at producing artifacts. Familiar with your tooling, I do similar stuff on my side. So if you're producing an artifact and you're doing this against Azure, Azure supports the 1.1. It's going to come out with a version that says you can do refers and artifacts to this registry. You push that artifact to that registry. In that case, automatically, the user tries to create some artifact, it detects it, automatically upgrades it. What do you do when the user says, okay, I want to copy this over to the GitHub container registry because it doesn't have that support yet?
Can you describe this? I might be behind here. What do you mean by automatically upgrades it?
If you're creating an artifact and you're creating the artifact on Azure, the comment here that you're making is that you want to see this version so that you know you can automatically go to artifacts and refers instead of pushing it with the image manifest.
Right. Oh, upgrade the workflow, you mean? Like
Yeah,
upgrade
and
the
so-
logic. Okay, I thought you meant
so
like
you're-
actually transforming something. Okay.
No, so your behavior changes. So your behavior is going to be automatically saying, I'm going to push this as an artifact manifest instead of the image manifest. You ship that up to Azure. And now the client says, great, let me ship this artifact over to GitHub Container Registry.
Mhm.
What's the workflow there knowing the GitHub Container Registry doesn't support that yet?
I feel like this is a quiz. I'm not prepared to answer but like it fails. I mean, is that bad? Like this
to
is
me
sort
it
of
is.
like, okay, but that's the world we live in, right? If we're going to have progress, we're going to move forward. We're going to have new features that are not backwardly incompatible, but don't exist in prior versions. That's bound to happen, right? It's not going to break 1.0 registries, but that client would not be able to just seamlessly move that thing over, right?
Maybe a better question is, how would you prioritize using new features versus portability of artifacts across registries?
In this context, I think I would probably, and I'm probably opinionated here, I would probably prioritize the feature over portability. I think in the fullness of time, with 1.0 being available and clients adopting it, we will have a window, and then there might be registries that never implement artifact support, right? That's okay. But I think that happens in software. I think some things stay in a legacy space, and those implementers or communities decide to support that however they're going to. That's my take. I don't know. I bet you other people have opinions, but that's how I see it.
I think the reason we're coming at this so differently is because I have the opposite take. I'm looking for portability. I want to make sure that whatever I create can go anywhere the user happens to be. But that's because we're coming at this from opposite directions.
I want to clarify that's not important to me. It's just not something I would prioritize over moving forward.
Fair enough.
Does anybody else have thoughts? Somewhere in the middle? Agreeing with either of us? Not that we're disagreeing, but it is, you're right, it's about prioritization.
At the risk of taking a stab at it, there were a couple of options that I was thinking about. So one is the simpler one, which is we at least provide a header saying that this is 1.1. Another option is that we call out a full capabilities API, which will definitely require more design time and agreeing on the fields and properties. The third item that I think is important is while reading the spec, there is no indication of the types of manifests that the registry should support. The first portion of the spec calls out examples of manifests. It does not say it should support index, image, and artifact in any form. So these would be parts of the discussion that I would like to have with this group, and how do they, is it important to address this before the release? I think these are the things that I'm hoping we can talk about.
So yeah, I was leaning much more for the capabilities, just knowing that the finer grain is probably going to be more important for client usage in there, but it's also going to take a lot longer to go through the process of defining that, creating that spec, whatever that is. And the question I threw at the end of my last comment there was, how long do we want to hold up the 1.1 to develop something like that?
Does that help with the does that help with the portability aspect? I would be absolutely willing to take a swing at the like a capabilities PR, like a capabilities endpoint. I'd happily do that and look for both client and registry implementers to give feedback on it. I don't think it helps with that though, right?
It doesn't. And that's why when we were first writing this, my logical thought process, how this would roll out was that we would roll this out in terms of you've got the new refers APIs eventually going to be available, but we had the fallback until it was available. We were going to assume that a lot of clients were going to stick with the image manifest until they knew that everywhere they might ship this artifact, that all those registries would get upgraded, and then they would make that switch. But the refers API would be on a registry by registry basis, and so that would automatically upgrade.
I think that, yeah, the use of the verb upgrade is still confusing me, but that's okay. I get you now. I might see that differently. Like as a client developer, I might, because the fallback is called out, I might just implement it. And then just like my client will keep falling back until it doesn't have to. But yeah, you're still left with this need to support your users around future portability. You know, so for example, I can speak in ECR, our plans, not a commitment, but our plans are to transparently support both types of artifacts, you know, both like, you know, sort of image manifests and indexes that have subject refers and use the tag schema. And then once 1.0 is there, we'll support artifacts and using a more native references. And we would keep supporting both of those, right? Because we'll have 1.0 only clients coming along, obviously. So I don't really even know, like I guess I'm not super concerned about the portability aspect. Unless there's something where like we're going to abandon people or we're going to break tooling, that I would be really concerned about. But I'm not hearing that really.
So re-grab my train of thought here. The one comment in there you're making was along the lines of, you know, the client needs to support the new stuff. I would definitely make a client that can read, that sees, hey, there's an artifact manifest. I know how to parse that as a client. I would do that right away. So that if somebody creates it, you're able to work with it. But I would hold off on creating the new one, just knowing that it takes a long time for this stuff to upgrade. Quite literally last week, I was working with a Docker 1.13.1 install. And in case you haven't run across that one in a long while, because hopefully you haven't, but it is kind of the default in some of these Kubernetes installs. It doesn't know how to work with the OCI index. The manifest that we've been depending all this stuff on because it exists for, you know, 4 or 5 years now, but it just did not exist at the time that client was written way back in the day. And so that's from the client side where that's usually pretty easy to upgrade a runtime on an individual machine. The thing I see is going to be a lot harder for a lot of clients to upgrade is going to be their registries that are in-house. And a lot of the workflows that I see are they have an external artifact, an external image, something like that they pull in. Yeah, I know CPU guy, that version is painfully old. They pull in the artifact from upstream into their own registry, and their own registry isn't going to be upgraded for a long while in a lot of places. And so I'm just worried that we're going to break that workflow, that if you start creating SBOMs and other stuff upstream, it's just going to take a while before you're going to be able to import those into a local registry that a client is running, because it's going to take them a long while to upgrade that registry.
All right, I completely agree with everything you said, but I think I'm still okay prioritization wise. Coming from the background that I have, lots of legacy software supported over 25 years. Like I get that pain, but it's a decision and it's okay. I mean, it's kind of okay for, in my book, for new features to pave new ground. And I really do. I think I would like to make sure that we try to like separate these two concerns. They're both valid. I would like just to say, like, I don't think the portability thing relates so much to just having an endpoint or capabilities. Like, so I think trying to tease them apart is good. No, it would. So Tiana, just to be funny, 113 was the final destination for the Solaris port I did. Speaking of LTS and the 25-year, yeah. So that's the real joke. So if anybody was going to pick up LTS,
yeah,
it got backed out. Just to be clear, yeah. I don't know. Like Do you think it's fair to say that we should separate these two things and just kind of try to talk about them in different contexts? Because I think there's one is like, portability best practices and client development guide, and another one is, can we have a sane way to determine what version the registry is or its capabilities?
So I think the need to do that difference of client behavior is kind of driving the first conversation. So if we get rid of the need for the client to make that change in behavior, I think that we eliminate a whole need for that whole discussion. That's why I've been pulling this thread a little bit. So just to be clear on my client use case out there, it is when they ingest this stuff, their registry isn't upgraded, but their clients are. Their clients can absolutely use an SBOM. They've got all the tooling out there. They're building the secure supply chains. They just don't own the registry server. That's a different part of the company. That server is going to be upgraded for 1, 2, 3, 5 years, however long it's going to take them. So if we push the artifacts in a portable way, they can still run a secure supply chain, pulling in SBOMs, pulling in signatures, validating all that stuff, which would be broken if we do it this other way.
So why would it be broken?
Because they can't import an artifact manifest. Their
Why
registry
not?
won't support it.
Oh, because no, I mean the other way. Like, so what this implies is that a registry will move to 1.1 and drop 1.0 support, or the ability for the fallback to work. Like that.
If you're creating an artifact,
Yep.
and the creation of the
future.
artifact sees the registry supports it,
Yep.
then that
Yeah,
artifact is
and-
no longer portable to an older registry.
Right. If you create a 1.1 artifact, right, that's just to be very explicit,
if the
a
upstream
1.1
vendor-
OCI artifact, right? If something, whatever, a client pushes an OCI artifact according to the 1.1 spec, right, that is not portable to a 1.0 registry. Full stop, right? Like that, we agree on that. What I would be concerned about is pushing things to a 1.0 registry that cannot be then pushed to a 1.1 registry, 1.2 into the future. I want those artifacts to not be stranded in the past and to be carried forward. I really am not concerned, and I might be the only one, so that's why I'm asking for other people's input. Like, I'm seriously not concerned about a new feature not being portable to the past. That's never a thing that we've ever done in software, right? So that's the part that I'm confused about. So just to be clear, portability, very important, hopefully to everybody, but portability of older artifacts forward is kind of the focus, right? It's never about making something sort of look like a future thing and then moving it back, right? That's kind of the thing I'm getting caught up on, is like the fallback, the tag support, the way to like kind of mock up an artifact is for legacy support. Yeah.
My understanding though is when you're creating your artifact, you're saying, if my registry supports it, I'm going to create it with a newer version. I'm going to create it with the artifact manifest.
Yes.
At that point, we're no longer talking about the case of you create on an old registry and try to port it to a new registry. We're saying you've created on a new registry and now all the old registries no longer support a copy of this too.
That's exactly right. Yes.
And that's the use case that I see happening a lot in the field.
Right. But I think that's what I'm saying, is that I personally am okay with that. So what we're saying is future thing can't be brought to the past. Past things can be brought to the future. I am okay with that.
But that future thing is useful to people that are using the past registry, because people that are using the past registry have a future client.
I get that. Like, I totally understand it, but like, we can't, I don't know how we change that other than we never move forward with native support and we always just do fallback forever. Right. Like, I don't know. Yeah.
The approach I've been pushing for was just hold off on pushing to the newer version of the manifest until you were comfortable that all the places you might copy that artifact to in the future had already been updated. And it would likely be a user-side switch. It would likely be something that the client itself would probably default to for a long while. And then at a certain point in the future, you would say, okay, we're comfortable that enough time has passed that we think that everybody that's copying these around is going to be upgraded on a new registry. We're comfortable using the new manifest type. But I saw a whole lot of hands pop up. So I think Michael was first.
I think it was Nisha.
Yeah, I think so. So At the risk of sounding dumb with like maintaining multiple versions over years, here's a scenario. So suppose there is like a registry implementation that is only like that gets newly developed by somebody, and it supports like the newest, like release 1.1. Somebody sees release 1.1, they see the spec, they implement the registry according to the spec. A client that is written for that kind of registry would just easily say, if I'm talking to that new registry like at this domain, then I will use this method of updating the of using SBOMs or whatever. But if I'm talking to like a OCI conformant 1.0 registry, then I will do a fallback. And that's the typical workflow I would think from the client side. But that's all I can imagine in my head. I of course, like, Docker is the heavyweight here. So I am not really sure if that is that's an issue that we should be concerned about. My feeling is that organizations seem to set up their own internal registries, and they'll just use distribution. And if there's a newer one out there, then they'll be like, oh, we could try that as an experiment.
I think you and Jesse are on the same page. And the
yeah,
scenario...
that's why I'm wondering, like, what is the scenario where a registry is like at the current state, which is, I don't know, 1.0 plus whatever it was before OCI was ever created. And then they had to, also support 1.3. Would registry implementers have a problem implementing that right now?
The scenario I see is that clients don't pull images directly from upstream to their production clusters. They pull those images in internally, they run it through a vulnerability scan, they do an internal blessing of that image or whatever they're going to do. And then from their internal registry, they run everything against their cluster. And so the cluster policies might want to say, make sure the stuff is signed, make sure it's got SBOM, make sure it's got all the secure stuff that it wants. But their internal registry can't support that if the artifact itself is shipped with the artifact manifest instead of the image manifest.
So I'm having a hard time picturing in my head whether that is something that we care about, like what the scanners do, and how scanners interpret whatever you store in a registry. Is that like a, I understand that there's like a whole like software security ecosystem that is around, scanning container images, but like if it scans something and it says, I don't know what this is, it's a document, I don't find any vulnerabilities in it, shouldn't that be fine?
If you have an SBOM from upstream, a lot of times they want to import that SBOM as well. And so they want to pull down that data. They want to pull down the signature as well to say this was signed from someone upstream. And so they can generate their own internal scans, but they can't copy that SBOM if they generate that SBOM with a non-portable format.
No, so who, the way I'm thinking about it is somebody, like suppose a client generates an SBOM using whatever SBOM tool, and they push it to a registry using the fallback method with the tag. The
We're looking at the
newer
reverse.
client, we're doing the
We're looking at the
reverse now.
reverse. We're looking at
Okay.
Microsoft puts their stamp on something that's pushed up to Azure. Azure's got the 1.1, it's got the new artifact manifest. So their image has, here's my SBOM, here's my signature, here's all the details, all the digest match, but it's all using the artifact manifest. If I'm running my own internal registry as a 1.0 registry, I can't import that into my registry.
But is that a problem? Like, can't the, that's a client issue. And I feel like as far as client implementations are concerned, that's kind of an easy thing. It's not like really, you're not standing it up. You're not, you're not maintaining it. It's not like exposed to the internet. It's kind of sitting in some place and going like, oh, I'm just going to make a call. I feel like the registry has like more responsibility and like taking care of its artifacts the way it wants to take care of its artifacts. So suppose a registry has like, is only v1.1 and it's like not supporting this extra tagging thing, or did I misinterpret? So a registry that implements 1.1 will automatically be supporting 1.0, is that right?
It would for that. Maybe I should draw a picture. People like my pictures, don't they?
More than you know.
The
Muted Michael, I think.
I like pictures, Brandon. Please go ahead and draw pictures. I still I still feel like, maybe I'm more on Jesse's side here. Like I feel like other, at least like, clients have more, or client implementers have more latitude than registry implementers.
Let me take a second, do some drawing. I'll turn it over to Michael for a second, and then we'll come back to this.
My mic working now? I tried to say something during that, but sounds like no one heard. I still think that there's sort of two separate issues here. There's the question of whether we should make it easy for clients to understand what a registry supports. And then there's this question of like, for people who are distributing public artifacts, should they use an image manifest, which we think is more portable, or should they be pushing artifacts as subjects? And I don't think that it's fair to say that because if you want something to be portable, you have to use an image manifest, means that clients should always just push image manifests. I think there's a lot of use cases where portability is actually never an issue. If you're scanning your own images into your registry and then pulling them down into your computer, you don't need.
Michael, your audio is like slowly going away.
Can you hear me now? Is that better? Got like 3 microphones. It's too many.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, like I think my question is just there's a lot of people who are going to push images and sign images in private registries and never port them anywhere. And for those clients, why should we make them worry about portability? Why can't we just have a way for clients to know, does this
does this registry support the new stuff or not? I think it's an option for people if they want to put things into compatibility mode, but it's not necessarily a requirement.
All right, that was long enough for me to draw. The scenario that I've got, and I see this a lot, it is not an isolated scenario. Is that a producer out there?
Well, sorry, can we just, not every use case involves portability. I just want an answer to that question before we move on to this.
So if you're producing to Azure and everybody is pulling just to Azure, then yeah, if you upgrade that, it wouldn't be a big deal.
And I think, I mean, most artifacts just get pushed to private registries and we never see them. Like they're just in someone's private registry somewhere. They're verified when they try to run the image, and like they never see the public registries at all. So what's the question that I thought we started with was, can we have a way of determining what a registry supports? You're saying if we want portability, if we want to distribute this across 6 different registries, we need a compatibility mode. I get that. I'm saying, why can't clients have a way of, for like default, normal, your sort of day-to-day artifacts, just pushing to the registry in the format that the registry supports?
So my push is, what's the need to jump so quickly to a different manifest type that so few registries out there support? And yeah, I get maybe the big registries out there would jump with support earlier, but I think there's going to be a very long tail of a lot of incompatibility out there. And we already have. We've got today a manifest that will work across everything. It's already out there. It already exists. We're forcing a change in the manifest, and there's not a value, there's not a value add. There's not a requirement to use it. We're just doing it because it's the new feature and we want to have it. And the scenario that I'm really worried about is that we're going to create this scenario where everybody out there that has this Artifactory 1.0 can't pull in base images upstream for everything, because all the signatures, all the SBOMs and everything for all those images they're importing, for all the tools they want to run on their cluster, they're written in a format that they just can't use. And so quite literally, I see this kind of scenario very often out there. And the solution is real simple, is that you can push it with an image manifest instead of the artifact manifest, and everything just works. And so that's where I'm getting to the question of, do we need to have this discovery automatically out there so that we can support the scenario where we just automatically change from an image manifest to an artifact manifest if there's not a real requirement to do so? So that's the question I'm throwing out there, knowing the downside. So I didn't have the attendees up, so I don't know who raised their hand first.
It's still Michael and then just me, as far as I can see. Michael, you all set?
I think so.
Okay, so I guess for the sake of time, like I appreciate the drawing. I don't know that I didn't understand this use case. I also want to be clear, you got a lot of registry implementers and kind of client software professionals in the chat right now. Like I think we all get it. Like we all see this. Nobody disputes that this is a thing that will happen. I think the question is, does the community want to move forward with new features, right? And so I would posit that spec work is always like this. I did this in the storage space for about 10 years, and it's always a weird thing where you're like, well, we're going to have, client confusion, and we're going to put a new thing out, and not everybody's going to want to use it. And it just kind of comes out in the wash over time, because ultimately these are client decisions, client software decisions, software stacks, providers, they'll all make decisions. To me, applying my sort of storage graybeard hat, I look at the registry as the storage layer. right? It's not even client server, it's a disk. And I worked a lot in storage back in the day, and we added new features and whole new protocols over time. And so our rule of thumb was always what I had said before. We must make sure that artifacts are portable forward. That is a mandatory requirement on registries. We cannot abandon customer data. We cannot abandon users' artifacts. So I think in that spirit, I think I would like to write a PR, one for either a version or capabilities endpoint. And in that, I will refer to this concern, and I will try and say, if we go this route, and Brandon, I'm inferring here that the worry about such an endpoint is that it will promote adoption. It will make it easier for clients to adopt the new features. That to me would be a goal. However, there is a concern. And so I think as part of anything that introduces such an endpoint that makes it easy for a client to say, oh, it's 1.1, let's do 1.1, is that client implementer must be aware of the portability risks that they're taking on for their users, right? You're saying if you're doing this, it means that if they're running a 1.0 registry, they're not going to be able to do it. I think that should be in the scope of a PR. And I think then we can see if more voices join the conversation too. And if everybody's okay with that, I think we can put a pin in it unless we have more to talk about. And then I just have a question.
I think kind of the comment you throw in there is that as a client decision, they can just upgrade their registry. They often can't. They often.
I didn't say that. I meant client as in client, like client software.
The producer can decide not to create something new.
This would be whatever tool the producer is using. That implementer needs to understand what they're choosing when they choose to use 1.1. They're moving into the future. So that's what I'm saying.
The producer doesn't choose 1.1. The producer pushes to their registry, and if the registry happens to have upgraded last night, suddenly those artifacts are no longer portable to all the places they were before.
Mm-hmm. So I think that's something that we can talk about in a PR. Potentially, we're talking about something like no automatic fallback. Like maybe you want client software to always be implemented as a mandatory fallback, which again would be a client decision, right? But as far as the storage system goes, this is always going to happen. And I know this is the first time that OCI is introducing new features, but we're going into the future. We will leave the past behind. That will happen.
You keep saying you're worried about if you upgrade this, you want to be able to support the old stuff. So if you upgrade from Azure 1.0 to 1.1, you want to be able to support the old stuff. That's a guarantee. We put that in the spec. Nothing in this has changed in that side. It's the flip of that of saying, okay, once this goes to 1.1, everybody that works with this is now forced to upgrade whether they wanted to or not.
Nope. I think the better way to say it is if you want to bring that artifact somewhere else, you better make sure it supports 1.1. Otherwise, it's not a destination. So it's not forcing anything to upgrade.
Just want to give Sai the moment for him to, probably them to actually just make
good call.
Hey, anybody can speak. There's a lot of people on this call.
Thanks, Sanjay. Quick question according to this diagram, right? So let's say if someone pushes an image with a 1.1 on ACR or Docker Hub anywhere, right? And if they're older Docker clients which still are on 1.0, they're not going to be able to pull that image. Is that correct? Or they can still be able
they can
to
pull the image. The image itself is still going to be the image manifest, but they can't pull the SBOM and the signature and stuff like that. But that's okay if you're pulling directly from here because the older Docker client doesn't know how to pull an SBOM or a signature. It's only when you go from here across to here and then to something that needs that SBOM.
Gotcha. Okay. Sorry, that was my confusion.
Great question.
I don't think it can hurt to open the PR. So that's kind of what I was looking for. It's just do we, and I can just make a guess at it and we can talk about it there too. Do we like a version or a capabilities endpoint? Just like generally quorum. Both? Neither?
Neither.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, you can just keep running in 1.0. That's what I have to say to you. You just keep running 1.0. We'll support you forever.
As long as the clients are out there still running Docker 113 on me.
It happens. And what do we do? What do we do when they're running a 2.8 Linux kernel? We say, oh my God, please update. Maybe they can't. That's okay. Okay, sorry, is Nisha or Nisha? I want to say it right.
Nisha.
Nisha, I was doing it right. Cool. All right, so I will point a PR at a capabilities endpoint proposal, and we can just talk more about it.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I'd like to see how that would work.
And do we want to get that in before we release 1.1?
If the PR boils the ocean, then no, I don't think we'll be able to get to it.
Yeah, it's I don't know how much of stuff needs to change in order to stick in a capabilities PR.
So
but if
I think
it's
that-
too big, then it may not go in before 1.1.
That's the worry I'd have. And I think implementation wise, I mean, none of it's rocket science, but for registries, version endpoint's a lot simpler than capabilities. That's why I started with version, but we can talk about it there. We could have maybe either, I don't know. But yeah, maybe that's actually, maybe this is a discussion. Do we do discussions on the repo? And we can do an
yeah,
issue.
I think
we can do an issue.
I think there's a discussion thing, but
They're
yeah, I don't
easier to
know.
miss. Issues are
Yeah.
usually more obvious.
Maybe I'll do an issue and we can discuss more, and then that can lead to a PR. And in the issue, I'll make sure to mock up what that would look like for both. Does that sound good to everybody?
Is there a problem reusing the same issue because it is versioning data for 1.1?
Yeah, I might just use that.
New issue, whichever you prefer. I'm fine.
No, that's 365, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll just do it there. And then that could lead to a PR. That sounds great, Sajay. Thanks for the reminder.
Cool. Till next week.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks,
Thank you.
Brandon, for leading.